Hello, class. I am going to be sharing the findings that I had from my qualitative and my quantitative reports. The topic for both of them was pretty much the same. It's about communication with God. And is it necessary to be in church to communicate with God, or is it necessary for you to attend church to communicate with God? So I will start with my quantitative findings. That was probably the hardest for me. I did the surveys, and for the surveys, I received the results from people. I tried to get some responses from people that went to church, that attended regularly, and then responses from people who did not attend church as regularly. So for the first question that I had, um, let's see. So for the first question that I had, it was how many of the participants actually participated church regularly. Um, and I got 24% for the people that actually attended, so they strongly agreed. 12% disagreed, 15% were neutral, 35% agreed, and then 15% strongly agreed or strongly disagreed. And then 33% also strongly disagreed. So there were more people on that particular question that did attend church regularly. Well, that was the answer to the question. The people that answered the question for the survey, they did attend church regularly. Um, for the next question, I was trying to figure out how often the participants prayed. So 52% strongly agreed, and then I had 1% that strongly disagreed, 6% disagreed, 18% were neutral, and 21% just agreed. So, from that conclusion, it was basically most of the participants um, prayed pretty often. I guess I kind of messed that one up though. um, and then the next question was trying to understand the relationship with God that they had. And so I asked them if the church determined their relationship with God. And 56% strongly disagreed. Um, and then 80% strongly disagreed on another survey. I ended up having to do two. Um, and then 31% disagreed on one. And on the second survey, 20% disagreed again. The neutral responses were 3%, 6% agreed, and then 3% strongly agreed. So for that one, it appeared that both the people that attended church regularly and did not attend church regularly, they both did not feel that they had to attend church to have a relationship with God. Um, and then my next question, I asked if prayer was the only way to communicate with God. 23% strongly disagreed, 31% disagreed. And then I had two surveys again. One got 16% for a neutral response, 25% for another neutral response. And then I got 16% that agreed on one and 75% that agreed on another. And only 13% strongly agreed with this survey or with this particular question. So the conclusion was that many believe that other methods of communicating with God do not include prayer. So there are other ways to communicate with God, at least according to that particular question of the survey. Um, and then I was trying to understand, let's see, if they felt that they had to. I asked if the participants felt comfortable being in church, and 3% disagreed, 9% disagreed on the second survey, and on the other for neutral responses, I got two responses again because there were two surveys. 22% on one, and then 50% on another for neutral. And then the same for the agreed. One was 28% and one was 25%. And then most of the respondents, or most of the responses I got, they strongly agreed. And then, yeah, most of the participants strongly agreed for that. So the conclusion was, many of the participants do feel comfortable in church, according to that question. Um, let's see. And then, so the next question I asked, um, was if the participants preferred to communicate with God, um, another way, or I'm sorry, I asked if the participants prefer to communicate with God in their homes. 9% strongly agreed. And then there were another uh, surveys of two with disagreeing, with where they disagreed. So one survey got 13% disagreeing, 20% disagreeing. And then the neutral response was 31% for one and then 40% for another. And then, again, there were two surveys. So there was 31% for agreeing on one, and then another 20% on agreeing. And then for strongly agree, we got 16% on one survey, and then 20% on another survey. Um, and so for that one, it was actually more of an inconclusive um, response because the responses were they were close. I believe they had they had close numbers. I guess the numbers were pretty close for the responses. And then, mm, right, so the last one that I have here is asked if participants felt that God could hear them more in church than at home. So 19% strongly disagreed, and then 41% uh, disagreed, and then 13% agreed, and then let's see, there were no. I'm sorry, 50% for neutral responses. Um, and so for this one, the conclusion was that many participants disagreed with that statement, and they felt that God could hear their prayers both at home and at church. Okay, so that is the end of the quantitative assignment that I had. As I said, it was very rough for me. So, um, the qualitative is the same topic as I said. Um, and this one was a little easier because it was mostly interviews. Um, I won't go in depth too much about the interviews, but I can tell you what the questions were I had and who I asked my questions to. So I did the same thing. I tried to pick people uh, who were frequent church attenders, and then I tried to pick people who were not frequent church attenders. Those that did attend church regularly, their ages range from 50 to 80. Um, and then the people that did not attend church as regularly, their ages range from 21 to 40. So they were a little younger. Um, but I think I still got some pretty good responses from both of them, surprisingly, especially for some of the answers. Um, I wasn't expecting some of the answers I got from them. But the questions that I did ask, the first one was describe your relationship with God. And then I asked to explain how the church plays a part in your relationship with God. I asked, how do you communicate with God? And how often do you communicate with God? And then I asked, when is the best time for you to communicate with God and why? And lastly, I asked, where do you prefer to communicate with God? Um, And for this one, as I said, it was I guess it's kind of harder to explain without going in depth with the whole interview process or giving, the whole uh transcript of the interviews. But I'll just give you a glimpse of one participant. Um, so I asked him, how often he communicated with God, and he explained that he communicates with God when he has free time, and that he preferred to communicate with God every morning at 7 in the morning. Um, but then there was another participant who actually said that, they didn't feel that there was a specific time to talk to God and that they communicate with God throughout the day. So this process was a little different. It seemed that everyone kind of had their own responses. It's not as easy to explain with the quantitative data. This is more like, you just kind of explain people's answers and their responses. Um, but my conclusion, at least for it, it just seemed that, people kind of communicate with God when they felt the need. Some of them did. I had one participant whose husband was deployed, and so she kind of prayed whenever she felt like, she was uncertain, especially during this time of her husband being in the Navy. Um, and then, some people, they just preferred to pray. Like I had one participant who preferred to pray outside. Actually, he felt like being in nature brought him closer to God. So everyone is just different when it comes to prayer. But no one seems to feel that they have to be in church to pray or talk to God or communicate with God. And that is what I found for both of these research findings. That was really the the main conclusion that I got from this study. So that is that. And I hope you guys enjoy this video. Thank you.